All right, guys, so we're at scene 8 of Act 5 of Macbeth, which is the very last scene of this tragedy written by William Shakespeare. In scene 6, we saw Malcolm tell his army to throw down their leafy screens, in other words, take off their camouflage because they are right outside the castle. And so in scene 7, the English army, along with all of the Scottish soldiers who have abandoned Macbeth, are all within Macbeth's castle and they're really closing in on him. Um, Macbeth swears that he is tied up like like a bear would be in like some type of spectacle, and that he's kind of stuck here, but he still is hanging on to the witch's apparition and the prophecy that he cannot be killed by anyone that has been born a woman. And so, even though Birnam Wood has come to Dunsinane and he's already seen that the witches lied once, he's holding on to their next prophecy. Then he fights with young Seward. So the English army general's son discovers Macbeth and fights him, and Macbeth kills him. Okay, this is going to be important later on in this scene when we talk about it. But then at the end of scene 7, Macduff is seen quickly looking for Macbeth, and he swears that Macbeth will die by his sword. Okay, and so now we're really closing in. Macbeth comes upon the scene, and basically, he refuses to commit suicide or to go out like a Roman soldier would. In the notation in your book, it says a Roman soldier is a soldier who commits suicide rather than be captured or otherwise dishonored. Okay, so Macbeth is probably recognizing that everything is closing in on him, but he refuses to give up. Okay, and that's kind of important to recognize that in some way, some of us are kind of hoping that Macbeth is going to turn his fate around, but that's not necessarily the case. So let's see how um, this story ends. Macbeth comes on stage and says, "Why should I play the Roman fool and die in mine own sword, whilst I see lives, in other words, enemies, the gashes do better upon them? Enter now Macduff." So Macbeth and Macduff are looking at one another on stage, and Macduff says, "Turn, hellhound, turn. Of all men else I have avoided thee, but get thee back. My soul is too much charged with blood of thine already. I have no words, my voice is in my sword. Thou bloodier villain than terms can give thee out." The two of them then fight. So Macduff says he doesn't even want to waste his voice. He wants his words to be in his sword. And so then the two of them fight. And Macbeth says, "Thou losest labor." In other words, he's telling him, "You're wasting your time, Macduff. As easy mayest thou the intrenched air with thy keen sword impress as make me bleed. Let fall thy blade on vulnerable crests. I bear a charmed life, which must not yield to one of woman born." Macbeth is telling Macduff, "Hey, listen, you're wasting your time here because I live a charmed life and I cannot die, right, to anyone that's born a woman." And right now is a very, very important line. So this is really, I would say, the height and the climax of the entire text. Macduff says, "Despair thy charm, and let the angel or the evil spirits whom thou still hast served tell thee Macduff was from his mother's womb untimely ripped." So what does that mean? Macduff tells Macbeth that he was from his mother's womb untimely ripped. So in today's day and age, we would call this a C-section. If you have been removed from your mother's stomach through a C-section, okay, you would not be born of woman in the natural way. And so we learn that really the witches have truly deceived and equivocated Macbeth, okay? Macbeth realizes in this moment that he has been led astray by the fiends who basically led him to this very moment. Macbeth says, "Accursed be the tongue that tells me so, for it hath cowed my better part of man." Okay, in other words, he now is no longer the brave man he was prior to learning the information that he just learned from Macduff. "And be these juggling fiends no more believed that palter means equivocate, right? With us in a double sense, that keep the word of promise to our ear and break it to our hope, I'll not fight with thee." So he tells Macduff here that I'm not going to fight with you. And Macduff says, "Then yield thee, coward, and live to be the show and gaze of the time. We'll have thee, as our rarer monsters are, painted upon a pole and underwrit, Here may you see the tyrant." Macduff says, "Fine, then we'll erect some type of memorial for you, right, where we'll recognize you to be the tyrant that you are." Macbeth says, "I will not yield to kiss the ground before young Malcolm's feet and to be baited with the rabble's curse. Though Birnam wood be come to Dunsinane and thou opposed, being of no woman born, yet I will try the last. Before my body I throw my warlike shield. Lay on, Macduff, and damned be him that first cries, Hold, enough." So in this moment, he says that he will try the last. So Macbeth vows to fight until the very end rather than give up, okay, and walk away. And so the two of them are having this intense sword fight on the stage, and they're fighting, and Macbeth is ultimately slain, right? So it's a little anticlimactic without visuals, but I want you to use your imagination here. Macduff exits and he cuts off Macbeth's head. Okay, it says that he's carrying his body here, but you'll see in the end that he has also sliced off his head, very much like Macbeth did at the start of the play to the enemy from Norway named MacDonwald. If you remember, he unseamed MacDonwald from the naves to the chaff and put his head upon his battlements. Okay, and so now enter with drums and colors Malcolm, Seward, Ross, Thanes, and soldiers. Malcolm said, "I would the friends we miss were safe arrived." So he wishes that all of his friends, all of his soldiers were here for this moment. And Seward says, "Some must go off, and yet by these I see so great a day as this is cheaply bought." In other words, the price that they had to pay was not very great. In other words, they didn't lose that many men, probably because so many people knew that Macbeth needed to be usurped, right? And the rightful king needed to be put in place, and that is Malcolm. Malcolm now says, "Macduff is missing, and your noble son." Ross reports, "Your son, my lord, has paid a soldier's debt. He only lived but till he was a man, the which no sooner had his prowess confirmed in the unshrinking station where he fought, but like a man he died." In other words, Ross reports to Seward that his son has died. "Then he is dead? Ay, and brought off the field. Your cause of sorrow must not be measured by his worth, for then it hath no end. Had he his hurts before?" So this is a very interesting question that Seward asks of his son. So he says, how was he killed? Was he hurt in his front side? In other words, was he stabbed and slain in the front or in the back? And Ross tells him that he was slain in the front. Seward says, "Why then, God's soldier he be. Had I as many sons as I have hairs, I would not wish them to a fair death." And so his knell is nulled. So Seward is pleased with his son's brave death here, and noble death. Okay, I like that he calls him God's soldier here. I think it took me many years to come to this observation and this conclusion, and I'm going to share my thought with you about this. I think that this is a juxtaposition of how Macbeth died. So this is truly a noble fight versus Macbeth. Macbeth really kind of did not go out nobly, where we see that Seward was fighting for a noble cause. So I think that that is done intentionally. So that's just kind of my thoughts about that here. Malcolm said, "He's worth more sorrow, and that I'll spend for him, so Malcolm will mourn Seward's son's death. He's worth no more. They say he parted well and paid his score, and so God be with him. Here comes newer comfort." So now Macduff enters the stage, and he is holding Macbeth's very bloody head. In the film, I would tell you guys to hide your eyes because there is a very bloody head in the character Macduff's hands, and Macduff says, "Hail, King, for so thou art. Behold where stands the usurper's cursed head. The time is free. I see thee compassed with thy kingdom's pearl, that speak my salutation in their minds, whose voices I desire aloud with mine. Hail, King of Scotland." And everyone on stage at this time now hails Malcolm, "Hail, King of Scotland." Malcolm then finishes the play. So this is the very last monologue and the last lines of the play. He says, "We shall not spend a large expense of time before we reckon with your several loves and make us even with you. My thanes and kinsmen henceforth be earls, the first that ever Scotland in such an honour named. What's more to do, which would be planted newly with the time, as calling home our exiled friends abroad, that fled the snares of watchful tyranny, producing forth the cruel ministers of this dead butcher, and his fiend-like queen, who, as 'tis thought, by self and violent hands took off her life." In other words, he reveals that Lady Macbeth killed herself here, which would have been very shameful. "This, and what needful else that calls upon us by the grace of grace, we will perform in measure, time, and place. So thanks to all at once, and to each one whom we invite to see us crowned at Scone." And this might seem like a very anticlimactic ending, but if you think back to who Shakespeare is writing this play for, King James would have been newly recognized as the King of England, and not everybody was on board with this decision. And so here there is a celebration and a crowning of the rightful king. Okay, and he says, and I think I wrote this in my notes. Okay, what's more to do, which would be planted newly with the time, right? So there's a lot to do at this time in this ushering in of this new era. So I think that this is a very apt way for Shakespeare to kind of end this play and also to celebrate King James. So even though it might seem anticlimactic at the very, very end with Malcolm's little speech here, I think that it's very appropriate for what's going on in the historical context in which Macbeth had been written. All right, guys, and that is it. We have now finished Macbeth.